everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. We always say we're going to go deep, and today we are really going deep.
Deeper than we've ever been before.
That's right. Today, it's all about you.
You got it.
And how you navigate relationships.
That's right.
And we're going to be using this really cool system called the Enneagram.
Yes.
Now, I know some of you are familiar with the Enneagram, but we're not going to get bogged down in all the nitty-gritty of all the 9 types.
Right?
We're going to focus specifically on how it applies to your relationships.
Exactly.
Okay, so think of it this way. We all have these kind of automatic responses to the world, right?
Yeah.
Like how we deal with stress or conflict.
Right.
But what if those reactions were like a secret code to understanding your relationships?
Like that.
And that's where the Enneagram comes in, because it helps us understand these natural movements we have in relationships.
And these movements are really based on the work of Karen Horney, a brilliant psychoanalyst. She identified 3 fundamental movements in relationships: moving away from people, moving against them, or moving towards them.
Okay, so fight, flight, or freeze, but for relationships.
Precisely. It's all about how we instinctively seek safety and connection with others.
Okay, that makes sense.
So we've got our withdrawn types, our combative types, and our expansive types.
I like those labels. It's very descriptive, right?
It is.
So let's start with the withdrawn types, the folks who kind of build that moat around themselves.
Yes, exactly. That's our 4s, 5s, and 6s.
Okay, so how does that actually play out? Are they just hermits hiding away from the world?
Not necessarily. It's more about needing that space and autonomy to feel safe.
Okay, so they retreat to recharge and then they can come back out and engage.
Exactly. They need that time to process and reflect.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about our combative types? Are they always picking fights?
No, not necessarily. But they are definitely more assertive, more comfortable with confrontation.
Okay, and we're talking about 8s, 1s, and 3s, right?
You got it. They're the ones who challenge the status quo, stand up for their beliefs, and strive for control in their environment.
So they're like the go-getters, the ones who make things happen.
Precisely. They have a strong sense of agency, and they're not afraid to take the lead.
I like it. Okay, so last but not least, let's talk about those sunshiny, expansive types, the 2s, 7s, and 9s.
Yes. The ones who bring people together, spread warmth and joy, and create harmony wherever they go.
They're like the social butterflies, right? Always flitting around, connecting with people.
That's one way to put it. They thrive on connection and belonging. They're naturally empathetic and attuned to the needs of others.
This is so fascinating. Okay, so we've got our withdrawn types seeking safety, our combative types taking charge, and our expansive types spreading the love.
Right.
But here's the thing. Are people really just one of these types? I mean, it seems like we could all have a little bit of each of these movements within us, right?
You're absolutely right. It's not that simple. And that's what makes the Enneagram so insightful.
Oh, a cliffhanger.
There's another layer to this whole movement thing.
Wait, there's more?
Yes, and it's where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
We call it the secondary function.
Secondary function. Okay, you're going to have to break that down for me.
Think of it like this. You've got your primary movement, your home base.
Right, like our initial instinct.
Exactly. But then you've got this secondary function. It adds a twist.
Ooh, a twist. I like where this is going.
It's like a secret ingredient that makes each type's recipe even more unique.
Ooh, I'm getting hungry just thinking about it.
It's what creates those little paradoxes we see in ourselves and others. Like, the seemingly contradictory behaviors.
Like when you think you have someone all figured out and then, bam, they do something totally unexpected.
Exactly.
Oh man, I can't wait to learn more about this. This is already blowing my mind.
You and me both. But I think we've given our listeners enough to chew on for now.
I know. Gotta leave them wanting more, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so make sure to join us for part 2, where we're gonna unveil those mysterious secondary functions and dive even deeper into this fascinating world of relational movements in the Enneagram.
Can't wait. Welcome back, everyone. Last time we left things hanging a bit.
Just a little bit, like on the edge of a cliff.
That's right, with those secondary functions.
Yes. Tell me more about those secret ingredients, please.
Okay, so remember we talked about primary movements, those go-to responses in relationships?
Yeah, those are like our gut reactions, right? Like our default setting.
Exactly, but then there's this other layer.
Okay.
The secondary function. It adds a twist to the story. It can either complement or contradict the primary movement.
Ooh, so it's not just more of the same?
No, it's way more interesting than that.
Give me an example, please.
So imagine a withdrawn type.
Okay, like a 4, 5, or 6.
Exactly. Their instinct is to pull back, create space.
Right, like build that moat.
But what if their secondary function is actually toward?
Wait, so they're withdrawn but also want to connect.
Exactly. It creates this push and pull dynamic.
That's super interesting.
It's like they're sending out mixed signals.
A little bit.
But it's not intentional. It's just this interplay of their natural instincts.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this adds like a whole other level of depth to the Enneagram.
Absolutely. And that's what makes it so powerful for understanding ourselves and others. It's not about putting people in boxes.
Right, because we all have these contradictions within us.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm ready to get into the specifics. Can we walk through each type and see how these primary and secondary functions actually work together?
Let's do it. Let's start with those withdrawn types.
Okay, so we've got 4s, 5s, and 6s. Let's start with the 4s, those deep feelers.
Okay. So 4s are withdrawn as their primary movement, but their secondary function is toward.
So they want to connect, but also need their space.
Exactly. They long for deep, meaningful connection, but they're also incredibly protective of their vulnerability. It's like they withdraw to safeguard their emotions, but at the same time, they're sending out these subtle signals, hoping someone will see through their walls.
It's like they're building a fortress, but leaving the drawbridge down just a crack.
I love that analogy. And that's what makes 4s so magnetic. They have this intensity and depth that draws you in.
But they also make you work for it a little bit, right?
Exactly. They're not going to open up to just anyone.
Okay, what about 5s? How do their secondary functions play out?
Well, 5s are withdrawn with a secondary function that's also away.
So double withdrawn, like extra introverted.
You could say that. They're the quintessential loners. They retreat into their minds, their world of knowledge and ideas.
It's like they create this safe haven where they can explore and analyze without distractions.
Exactly. They find comfort in understanding and mastering their chosen fields.
Okay, that makes sense. And 6s, what's their deal?
Okay, so 6s are withdrawn, but their secondary function is against.
Wait, so they're cautious but also combative? That sounds like a tricky combination.
It is. They're the ones who are always scanning the horizon for potential threats.
Always on high alert.
Exactly. But they're not just running away. If they sense danger, they can become surprisingly fierce.
So it's like they're prepared to fight if they have to.
Exactly. They withdraw to assess the situation, but they're ready to defend themselves or those they care about.
That's really interesting. Okay, we've covered the withdrawn types. What about the combative types? How do their secondary functions add to their intensity?
Okay, well, 8s are combative with a secondary function that's also against.
So double combative, like extra
Yeah.
fiery.
Yes, exactly. They have this incredible force of will.
It's like they're always ready for a challenge.
They're natural leaders, protectors, but they can also be very intimidating.
I can see that, especially with that double against energy.
A lot of intensity to handle.
Okay, what about 1s? How does their secondary function impact their combative nature?
Okay, so 1s are combative, but their secondary function is actually withdrawn.
Oh, interesting. So they're principled, but also need their space.
Exactly. They have this strong sense of right and wrong, and they're constantly striving for improvement, but they also need time to reflect and process.
It's like they're fighting for justice in the world, but also battling their own inner critic.
That's a great way to put it. They have high standards for themselves and others.
Okay, and what about 3s? They're the achievers, right?
That's right. 3s are combative, but their secondary function is toward.
So they're driven, but also want to connect, like ambitious, but charming.
Exactly. They're masters of image and adaptation. They know how to win people over.
It's like they're climbing the ladder of success, but also building relationships along the way.
Precisely. They're very strategic and goal-oriented, but they also value connection and belonging.
Okay, so we've covered withdrawn and combative types. Now bring on the sunshine. What about those expansive types?
Okay, so 2s are toward with a secondary function that's also toward.
Double toward, so like extra loving and caring.
Exactly. They're the embodiment of generosity and empathy.
It's like they have an endless supply of love to give.
They really do. They're always looking for ways to help and support others. But they can also get lost in their caretaking role.
Yeah, they need to remember to take care of themselves too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lifelong lesson for 2s.
Okay, what about those adventurous 7s? How do their secondary functions play out?
Okay, so 7s are expansive, but their secondary function is against.
Wait, so they're outgoing but also independent.
Exactly. They crave new experiences, but they also resist anything that feels limiting.
It's like they're constantly seeking that sweet spot between connection and freedom.
Precisely. They're the life of the party, but they also need their space.
Okay, that makes sense. And lastly, what about nines? They're the peacemakers, right?
Yes. Nines are expansive, but their secondary function is away.
So they're all about harmony, but also need their alone time.
Exactly. They're masters of creating a peaceful atmosphere.
They're like the calm in the storm.
But they can also be a bit too accommodating at times.
Like they go with the flow a little too easily.
Right. And that away function can make them seem a little detached sometimes.
Okay, wow, we've covered all 9 types and their secondary functions. This is a lot to process, but I'm starting to see how it all fits together.
It really is fascinating, isn't it? And we've only just scratched the surface.
There's always more to learn with the Enneagram,
Always.
but hopefully this gives everyone a good foundation for understanding these relational movements and how they show up in their own lives and relationships.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The key is to use this knowledge with compassion and understanding.
For ourselves and others.
Exactly. And remember, we're all a mix of these movements. No one is purely one type or another.
It's all about finding that balance, right?
Exactly.
All right, so we've talked the talk, now let's walk the walk.
Let's do it.
You know, we've learned about these relational movements in the Enneagram, all this fascinating theory.
Yes.
But how does it actually play out, in real life?
Right. In the wild.
In the wild. I like that.
Yeah.
So to really bring this to life, I thought, let's take a specific example.
Okay.
And I was thinking, what's a really interesting pairing?
What's that?
A 4 and an 8.
Ooh, interesting.
Because on the surface, they seem so different, right? The withdrawn 4,
Yes.
the combative 8,
Total opposites.
total opposites. But I have a feeling you're going to tell me they can actually make it work.
Oh, absolutely they can. It's all about understanding and appreciating those differences.
Okay, so let's set the scene a little bit. Let's say we have a 4, we'll call her Ilara,
Okay.
and an 8, we'll call him Marco.
All right. I like it.
And they meet, I don't know, at an art gallery opening, something like that.
Ooh, perfect.
What do you think? How do those initial sparks fly?
Okay, so imagine Alara. She's drawn to this piece of art.
Okay.
It's very evocative, full of emotion, and it really speaks to her, her deep inner world.
Okay, very 4-ish.
Very fourish, yes.
Yeah.
And then Marco walks in. He's got this, magnetic energy.
Okay.
He's confident, assertive. He commands attention.
All right, classic 8.
Classic 8. And there's definitely an attraction there, right? But those initial sparks, they could fizzle pretty quickly if they don't understand each other's styles.
Oh, for sure. So what could go wrong? What are some of the potential pitfalls here?
Well, Alara, she needs her space, right? To process her emotions,
Yeah.
to recharge.
Alone time is essential for a 4.
Exactly. But Marco, he's used to, direct communication action.
Yeah, 8s don't really do subtle, do they?
Not really. So he might misinterpret Alara's need for solitude as rejection or disinterest.
Oh, that makes sense. And on the flip side, Ilara might feel overwhelmed by Marco's intensity.
Exactly. She might see his assertiveness as aggression.
Oh, yeah, that could definitely create some tension.
Big time.
And I'm guessing those secondary functions, they don't really help matters.
Well, Alara's secondary function is toward, right? So she actually does crave connection, but she expresses it in a much more subtle way.
Okay, so she's not rejecting Marco, she's just speaking a different language.
Exactly. And Marco's secondary function is against, which can make him even more forceful when he feels insecure.
Oh boy, so he might push Ilara away even further.
Exactly. It's like a recipe for disaster.
Okay, so this relationship is on the rocks. What's the lifeline? How do they turn things around?
Well, the key is communication.
Always.
Always. They need to talk about their needs, their expectations.
And maybe a little bit of Enneagram education wouldn't hurt?
A little Enneagram 101 never hurts.
Exactly. So Ilara might need to learn to be more direct with Marco. Tell him what she needs.
Yes. And Marco might need to learn to give Alara the space she needs without taking it personally.
Okay, so it's about finding that balance, respecting each other's needs.
Exactly. And it's not just about talking. It's also about actions.
Oh, for sure. Actions speak louder than words, as they say.
Exactly. So, Marco could show Alara he supports her creative pursuits.
Okay, maybe he helps her set up a studio, something like that.
Exactly. And Alara, she can make an effort to engage with Marco on his terms.
Maybe she goes to a sporting event with him, even though it's not her usual scene.
Precisely. It's about finding those points of intersection, those shared interests.
Okay, so they're starting to understand each other a little bit better. They're making an effort.
Yeah.
But can this relationship actually, thrive? Can they really learn and grow from each other?
Absolutely. I think their differences can actually become their strengths.
Ooh, I like that. Tell me more.
Well, Alara, she can help Marco tap into his emotional depth.
Okay, because 8s can sometimes struggle with that, right?
They can. They're so focused on action and control that they sometimes neglect their feelings.
Right. And Marco, he can help Alara be more assertive, stand up for herself.
Yes. He can teach her to set boundaries, to not be afraid to go after what she wants.
Wow. So they really do complement each other in a
They
way.
do. It's like they each hold a piece of the puzzle the other one needs.
It's so beautiful how that works out sometimes.
It really is.
Well, I'm feeling very optimistic about Alara and Marco's future.
Me too.
But I think we've given everyone a lot to think about today, about how these relational movements can play out in real-life relationships.
I hope so.
And, it's not just about romantic relationships, right?
No, not at all.
This applies to friendships, family dynamics, work relationships.
All kinds of relationships.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the next time you're feeling a little friction with someone, think about these movements.
Yes.
Try to understand where they're coming from.
Right. And remember, it's not about changing people. It's about understanding them.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
And remember, this is just the beginning, right? There's so much more to explore with the Enneagram.
Oh, absolutely.
So keep learning, keep growing, and most importantly, keep diving deep.